Let's start with the prayer. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahay Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so let's just wanted to do a quick review of the karmas. So we discussed what's happening with how you're born with prarabdha karma. So a certain basket of good apples or the red apples and the green apples. Then we also discussed how during your lifetime you add to the basket of red and green apples, and if there's any left over at the end at death, that becomes a part of the bigger basket with the infinite red apples and green apples. And then when you're born again with a basket of red apples and green apples, and this is called prarabdha karma. So this takes you through your life, and you have this prarabdha karma dictates how long you have to live and what consequences you'll face. You also have free will. So from the perspective of the jiva, or from our perspective, we have free will, and there is also destiny because of prarabdha karma. What else? There's also vasanas we discussed. So vasanas, these are tendencies. So at birth, you have certain sort of tendencies. So for instance, there's a group of friends of sitting at a sitcom. Some of you may find what's said on the stage very funny and maybe laughing out loud. The other person might just be standing and staring at the comedian over there, or whoever's the stand-up comedian over there, not laughing, just finding it silly. So that's where the vasanas come into play. It's how you react to different things, what your interests are. Yeah, some may love sports, some may be academic, some may be all-rounders. So there's a lot of things that vasanas influence. It also tells one, for instance, somebody is doing better than you. You may be jealous, and that's probably because of your vasanas. How far you take it, that depends on you. Vasanas only are a tendency, whereas how far you take it, that's up to you. How influenced you are by it. Now, in saying this, we discussed a certain aspect of our life where karmas actually form the basis of our behaviors, etc., right? Or our actions in the future, or what happens to us in the future. In the past, we discussed two types of bodies. One is the physical body, or the sthula sharira, and the other one is the sukshma sharira, or the subtle body. Now, this is where I'd like to introduce to you the third body, which is called the karana sharira, or the causal body. So the causal body is, as it states, the karmas and the vasanas that drive your tendencies, that drive your lifestyle to a certain degree. So that's your karma sharira. So there is three bodies here. One is the physical body, the subtle body, and the third one is the causal body. So these three bodies, the physical body is, of course, Annamaya Kosha, which is the physical body that you and I have. Sukshma Sharira forms your life force your mind and intellect. And of course, your senses, ego, and a few other things become a part of the mind and intellect. Then you have the Anandamaya Kosha, which is the last one, which is called the causal body. Okay, so you have two different ways of categorizing these, and that's hopefully that sums up uh, the makeup of our body. What else? So there was a question about child prodigies. How do they come about? And there's a couple of other questions. So I'll answer those slowly. So that was actually a good one, because there is another aspect to our next birth. So say, for instance, in this birth, uh, you are a you're a musician, you want to compose a few things, you are very passionate about it, and you only live to compose music. Okay, towards the end of your life, when you're on death's door, you're still thinking, oh, I haven't completed my task, I need to do this, and you're still working on it, and then you have an untimely death, right? This has a very strong impression on your mind, and in your next birth you kind of pick up from where you've left off. This is where you see young talents, ages of 3 or 5, who are very talented, and they're composing music or they're doing things. Okay, um, some examples we had, for instance, a brilliant mathematician around the turn of the 20th century called Ramanujan. He was as a child he was brilliant. He was not very well educated, but he came across a small a partial mathematics book on mathematics, and and he expounded on it. By the time he died, which is at the age of 30, he had written about 2 full books of theories about solutions, mathematics. I don't know how do you say it, uh, formulae and theories. Even today, people are trying to decipher some of these things. He was that brilliant. You have some sports stars, women's sports stars, who have started at the age of 15 and they're playing women's tennis. You have great musicians like Mozart, who started very young. You have great scientists. All these things, they've started at a very young age. Okay, and even now you'll see, maybe sometimes in WhatsApp videos, you might see some really brilliant talent that youngsters have, and they're taking it forward. They might become really famous in the future, but that's a different thing. But this explains child prodigies. Okay. Um, the other one I wanted to discuss was rebirth versus reincarnation. Any of you know what's the difference between rebirth and reincarnation? And what is it that we believe in? Anyone? Okay. So rebirth and reincarnation. So rebirth, this is more like in Buddhism. They say that a person is reborn with pretty much the same attributes as they are right now in their next birth. Okay, so if he's a preacher, for instance, in this birth, in the next birth also he'll be preacher. This is why the Dalai Lama, for instance, they look for the next Dalai Lama based on rebirth. They believe in that rebirth concept. Whereas in ours, that's not the case. So you're born with, like we discussed in karma, you're born with a basket of apples, and red apples and green apples. So those vasanas, they determine your lifestyle this lifetime. So you may be a saint now. In the next life, you may be born with a lot of bad apples, or the green apples, more green apples than red apples, and you could be a criminal. So this is the difference between rebirth and reincarnation. And they believe, the people who believe in rebirth also believe in the fact that you can remember your past births. But in reincarnation, your memory is limited to your brain, the physical aspect of your brain. So you don't remember past births. Okay, in your reincarnation, it's a whole new basket of fruits that you have, that you're dealing with. You're not looking at the past lives. That's how it is. I think I've covered most of karma. There'll be a few other things maybe in the future that we'll come across the same things in other ways. But I think I've covered most of karma's topic. So we started Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna's lamentation. He is not willing to fight with his kith and kin. He doesn't want to kill Bhishma or Drona or any of his cousins. He's ready to kill himself. Krishna at one stage kind of calls him a wimp, saying, "Come on, get up, you need to go and fight. Don't behave like a wimp," or something like that. And he kind of reiterates his thoughts and is reluctant to fight, and then he surrenders himself to Lord Krishna, who starts giving him advice. So Lord Krishna starts giving him advice from verse 11 in chapter 2. So 11 was where Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you speak words of wisdom, all right? You're speaking like a wise man, but you should not really mourn for something that is not worthy of being mourned, okay? And then he says the wise people, they don't lament, they don't grieve for the living or the dead. Can I just quickly ask, what is he talking about here? The living or the dead? Who is he referring to when he says wise people?
Is it the soldiers?
No, the wise people, he's talking about people who have the knowledge of the Brahman. So he's talking about the people who are wise, who have the wisdom. Okay, they don't lament, or they don't grieve for the living, or they don't live for the grieve for the dead. The reason is they know this is not the end, and that this body that we have is just a phase. We die, and then there is a new phase. So we'll come back to that in verse 30. So in verse 12, we've discussed the Brahman. So probably, yeah, Brahman and the Stula Sharira. So here he tells, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, he's telling Arjuna, and he's telling none of these kings. Never was there a time when they did not exist. Nor in the future will any of us cease to exist. Okay, so he's talking about the Brahman and the Stula Sharira. Then in verse 13, he talks about our Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, that goes through childhood to youth, through old age, and then death. And after that death, the subtle body, it moves from one body to the next. Okay, and he says the wise are not deluded by this. The wise know this. So this is going back to verse 11. He's telling where the wise do not grieve for the living or the dead. He's talking about this knowledge that we have discussed in verses 12 and 13. Anyone have any questions on what we have discussed so far? No? Okay, so let's move on to verse 14. Can I get you guys to repeat after me, please? Matra,
Matra,
Sparsha,
Parshara
Tu,
tu
Kaunteya,
Kaunteya,
Kaunteya
yeah, Shito,
Geeta.
Ushno,
Ushna.
Sukha,
Sukha.
Dukkada,
Dukkada.
Agama,
Agama.
Apayana,
Apayana.
Anitya,
Nitya.
Tan,
Ham.
Titikshvasa,
Tichwasa.
Bharata.
Bharata.
Here, Bharata is referring to Arjuna. And Kaunteya is also Arjuna, son of Kunti. So here he's telling sense perceptions or our senses. For instance, our eyes. We perceive something with our eyes. Our nose, we perceive something with our nose. So these are your senses, your touch. Okay? You sense things. He's saying these senses. So you sense, and he's giving a couple of examples as to what you sense. Shita is winter. Ushna, summer. Sukha, happiness. Dukkha, distress. So he's saying these are some of the things you experience because of your senses. Okay? Whether it's cold, heat, pleasure, pain, all these things you sense. That is why you feel them. But these senses, these feelings, these sensations, like the cold, heat, pleasure, pain, they're not permanent. They will last for a while and then it changes. So these things keep changing. You should endure them. He's telling you should tolerate it. You should endure them. Okay. So can I ask a quick question? What's permanent? Anyone?
Would it be the cycle of just getting reborn over and over again unless you get moksha?
And then what is the other one that's permanent? Brahman. That is the only truth. Why would we say it's the only truth? Because everything else is an appearance of the truth. We are alive, yes, you and I are true, but we change constantly. What is unchanging is the only truth, which is the Brahman. Okay. All right, let's go on to verse 15. Yam hina.
Yamhina.
Yambina.
Yeah, yam hina. Vyatayanti. Ete
Yute.
purusham.
Purusham.
Purusha.
Purusha.
Rishabha.
Rishava.
Sama. Sama.
Sama.
Dukkha.
Dukkha.
Sukham.
Sukha.
Dhiram.
Dhir.
Sa.
Sa.
Amritatvaya
Amrita.
kalpate.
Kalpate.
Okay. So this is verse 15. And again, Lord Krishna is addressing Arjuna and he's saying, you are the noblest of men. Okay. The person who is not affected by happiness and distress. So he's talking about the wise man, the person who's not affected by happiness or distress, and remains steady in both, becomes eligible for liberation. So here he's talking about the wise who understand the Brahman, the wise who understand the cycle of death and birth, and he's telling it is those people that are eligible for moksha. So he's asking Arjuna to start considering uh, all the things that he's discussed in the past, in the last couple of verses. Okay, that there is only one truth, and you are worried, you are grieving for something that is not permanent. What's not permanent? This body of ours is not permanent. So you're grieving for that. You're not thinking like a wise person. You seemed wise when you first started, but now as you see, you're this is uh, this is who a wise person is, who's not affected by either happiness or distress, who is not affected by the cold, who is not affected by the heat, who is not affected